Hi there, and welcome to Fireside Fridays. Woo! These are our Fireside Chats we've been doing since the beginning of COVID. So excited to be here today. My name is Chrissy Hodges. I am the founder and executive director of OCD Gamechangers. I am the author of Pure OCD, The Invisible Side of Obsessive Compulsive Disorder, and I'm a certified peer support specialist. I work with people around the world, giving them support and also connecting them to referrals and resources for OCD. And I also, this is so great because I always introduce this, but now I can introduce this as the co-founder, and here's my business partner. Wait, this way. I am the co-founder of Peer Recovery Services, which is, we own a government contract that puts peer support specialists in the state institutions. And Melissa is my business partner. Woo!
Okay.
So I'm going to have her introduce herself.
All right. Well, hello. I'm Melissa Hunter, and I'm a licensed professional counselor in Colorado and New Jersey, and I'm also a certified peer support specialist. And as Chrissy just told you, we started a business a couple years ago running a contract through the state of Colorado where we provide peer support specialists to the mental health institutes.
Yep.
And we also have another new project we just launched, but I'll let Chrissy tell you about that.
We're going to actually have Neil come on probably in about 20 minutes and then promote it for, have him be here when we talk about that. But we can't wait to tell you. If you follow me on social media, you already know what it is. But we'll go more in depth then. So Fireside Chats are digging a little bit into some of the issues in our community, our OCD community, that really need to be talked about, that don't have, we don't get a lot of advocacy on, up and coming things that people are doing that people really need to know about. And peer support is one of those. So I've been wanting to talk about peer support for a while, and this is the perfect opportunity, having someone with me who not only is pretty new in treating OCD as a therapist, but also understands peer support inside out. So today on the Fireside Chat, pretend like you're sitting by a fire and you're just learning about really, unless you're somewhere where it's burning up, then don't pretend that. It could be like the freezer chat. But today we're going to talk about what is peer support. I get this question all the time. What is peer support? Why are you doing it? What is it? What's the benefit, and how is it different from therapy? And those are some of the questions we're going to answer for you today. And then we're going to segue into a project that we're offering people in order to get peer support in a group practice. So Melissa, the question of the hour is, what is peer support? So in your own words, especially because you've worked as a peer support, what is it? What does it mean to you?
Well, when I think about peer support, I think, one of the original types of peer support that comes to mind when I hear the word peer support is AA. It was one alcoholic talking to another. It was someone who had lived experience sharing their recovery so somebody else might benefit. And we've actually, seen that evolve from that kind of original concept. And now we train people through a professional curriculum. Most states do, and there's even a national certification. So what we do is we take people who have lived experience in addiction or mental health issues, and we train them on how to use that experience for their own benefit, as well as for the benefit of others who are still struggling. It's meant as a support. It's often an adjunct to clinical support. Sometimes it's standalone. It's very unique, though, in that the peer comes alongside the other person. They are not the expert. They're not talking theory. They're actually sharing their own experience in such a way that it creates a relationship that allows both parties to thrive and flourish.
Yeah, thank you. That you said that way more eloquently than I did, or I would. So people come to me a lot and ask me about peer support, and they often have the same kind of story that I have in regards to it, which is, I want to do something, I want to give back, but I don't want to be a therapist. And this is the kind of the tug of war that I did for a while. I knew after my experience with OCD, I wanted to somehow bring awareness. I wanted to somehow be able to support people. Going down the coaching route to me was just not acceptable. I needed training. I needed supervision. I needed something so I could protect myself as well in regards to learning boundaries and being able to support people where it's actually helping them instead of harming them if I didn't have the correct training. I explored going back to get my master's and becoming a therapist, but there were too many barriers of being able to tell my story. And I think telling your story is so powerful. And when we're talking about OCD, we're talking about people who feel ridiculously isolated. I mean, alone to the point of, I don't want to tell anybody what I'm going through, because what if someone finds out I have thoughts about being a pedophile or a murderer, or I can't figure out my sexual orientation, or any of that, or health, things like that. And so people close off, they shut down, and they live in silence, and that builds stigma. And peer support is what comes in and just smashes that barrier. And when I found out that this was an actual career path, I was super, super excited. So Melissa and I started working right around the same time in 2015 here in Denver. We started working for a company and called,
doesn't matter.
We started working for a company and doing different, because peer support, I worked in a drop-in center, I worked in the state institution, I worked out in the community with people who had integrated from a institute setting out into the community. Melissa's the same thing. And so now I really want to explore for us. Let's talk a little bit about how peer support helped us in our own journey with mental health. So Melissa doesn't have OCD, but she does live with mental health symptoms and has a story to tell. But what was it about peer support that really helped you in your journey?
Well, it was a number of things. So I think since around 13, I started struggling with intense anxiety and major depressive disorder. And I just probably tried every kind of cocktail known to man for antidepressants, mood stabilizers. I got all kinds of diagnoses, some accurate, some outlandish. I had sometimes good months, maybe a good year, and then I would kind of cycle back and forth. And I really got so sick, I didn't think I could live anymore. And I went through, I was hospitalized for a week, which was actually like a powerful experience. I think that actually did more to kind of get me back on track than people would think. A lot of people are like, oh, never, not the hospital. But I found it to be actually really rejuvenating. And then I did electroconvulsive therapy 3 days a week for a month. And man, that does a number on you. Really, literally just wiped my memory out. I was in grad school at the time, and suddenly I would not even know where I had been all day, and I would find myself somewhere. And it felt more insane than having chronic depression and these panic attacks. So I needed to get a job, and I saw this ad for peer support, and I thought, well, I have a mental health diagnosis. Maybe this will be something that works. I just need to get a job. So I took this job, and that's where I met Chrissy. And that was really the first time for me where I wasn't talking to a clinician about my symptoms or how my medication was working or anything like that. It was the first time I had the experience of saying, nobody understands what it feels like to feel like you're crazy, and how isolating that is, and how stigmatizing it is, and how awful. Like, I felt like if people knew that I had ECT, that they would think I was defective or damaged, or, one flew over the cuckoo's nest. So it was the first time where I had a group of people that, I could say, oh, I know, I felt like that too. Or I could tell them what my experience was, and they were all like, uh-huh. Oh, sure. Yeah, I remember when I was hospitalized. It was so empowering to have people around me saying, I get where you are. I get what you went through. I understand. why your family doesn't understand, because my family doesn't understand either. It was, I think that did more for my recovery than almost anything else. Like, it really rocketed me into a whole different way of viewing myself and where I fit in the world. And it actually helped me feel like, you know, this is the face of mental illness. This is what it looks like. And there's nothing horrific or terrible or awful about it, because it can be anybody. It made me feel like I'm not alone anymore. Lots of people understand this. Lots of people have been through experiences like mine or slightly different. It really, sometimes I think it doesn't even matter sometimes what the mental illness is, because so many of the components are the same. There's the loneliness, there's the inability to be understood, there's the stigma of what if people knew. Like, I had never had a job where I would tell somebody I had ECT, because I think people would have probably kind of thought I was, crazy. And that was something I was so afraid of. I was so afraid people were going to label me. I was afraid I was going to lose my kids. I had gone through a divorce, and I thought, man, if the court knows. And I would be able to talk to my peers about some of these things that were happening. And people were like, yeah, this is exactly what we've been through, and we understand and we get it. And here's what I did, which helped me a lot with my anxiety. Or have you thought about this? So it was this coming alongside that was so healing and so powerful and so connecting. So even though I'm a clinician now and I totally believe therapy works, you get the right therapist at the right time, therapy can be life-changing, but there is something about peer work that is incredibly powerful.
Magical.
Cannot be underestimated. And now there's all kinds of empirical evidence that supports people who get peer support actually do better. They have outcomes that are more positive. They tend to stay less symptomatic for longer periods of time. There's all kinds of stuff now. It's not guesswork like, oh, we think this kind of works. There's so many studies out there that say this actually makes a huge difference for people, and whether they get rehospitalized, whether they get a higher degree of symptoms, right? How well can they manage their mental illness? So I'm really a huge fan. For me, it was life-changing.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because peer support is evidence-based.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's a lot of people that think that it might not be, or may think it's unethical to see a peer supporter or something along that lines, because maybe you just don't understand peer support. And that's why we're here to talk a little bit more about it and to educate people on the differences between peer support and therapy. As peer supports, we are trained 100% to never say peer support should be done over therapy, ever. Like, therapy and working with the right therapist for what you're diagnosed with is the most important. And we come alongside you and help support you throughout the process towards recovery. And that's what's so, so beneficial about peer support. So with that, and thank you, Melissa, for sharing that. And I will talk really briefly about Anxiety Specialists of Atlanta. Hello, yay! Yay, Josh, thank you for being here. I will talk a little bit about what peer support meant to me. When I went into the field of peer support, I kind of mentioned it earlier, I wanted to do something, wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And I found this job, same thing with Melissa. I knew that I wanted to do it, but I needed formal training. I needed to be in an environment where I could learn the craft so I wasn't harming people. And hey, Josh, yay! Our big supporter, he's such a huge supporter, Josh Spitalnik. I think I said it right, Josh? Spitalnik, yes! I remember the towel. That's how you know. You put a towel on. Towel, Spitalnik. Anyway, so when I first started doing, I wanted to get in. I wanted to make sure that I was doing, I was going to be helpful and supportive to my clients with peer support. And so I was very lucky. Melissa and I were both very lucky to be on a team of peer supporters that valued trauma-informed care, that valued giving peer supporters a voice. And I think because of our experience together in that, we've taken that And we've now implemented it in the businesses that we have and empowering the peers that we hire and supporting one another in really giving peer supporters autonomy and the ability to be creative and also emphasize trauma-informed care. So when I started peer support, I'm going to be transparent here. I was like, I'm going to get in there and get trained for free while I'm getting paid. And then I'm out and I'm going to start doing peer support for OCD. And the opposite happened. I fell in love with it. I wanted to learn more about how to support people with different diagnoses. I wanted to learn more about homelessness, generational poverty, what it means to have, major mental illness and substance use attached to it. Like I was just so intrigued by all of this, and it became bigger than just OCD for me. But more importantly, on my own journey, this, just like Melissa, this was the first time I'd ever met people that were so willing to disclose some of the most intimate details of their recovery journey that would sometimes I would be in tears with them, or I would be the one down, and I would sit in, a room with Melissa or Jody or other people that were peers there, and they would give me peer support when I needed it, which is very different from therapeutic support. And so I grew so much, and especially that first year of understanding peer support for me. And I say this often, peer support gave me permission to feel all the emotions that come along with having mental health. I was very much in the like the mental health closet of, I don't want to talk about everything. I'm strong and it doesn't matter. And none of that stuff matters. And when I started working with peers, they were like, yeah, you can be angry. You can be sad. You should be like, this sucks. And that's like my peer colleagues taught me how to be a better peer support. And then I started seeing the value, and it just accelerated my own healing and recovery. And so I just knew the moment that I started doing the work that this is where I belong. This is my calling, and have been dedicated ever since. So before Neil's going to join us probably in about eight or 9 minutes. But before that, let's talk about some of the differences between peer support and therapy, because I think it's really important for us to clear up any sort, like I was saying before, like some people don't understand it. They're ignorant to what peer support is. So let's talk a little bit about that so people feel more comfortable about referring people to peer support or working with a peer in their own practice. So do you want to start with that? Like what are some of the difference between therapy and peer support?
Well, I think it's not always education, but oftentimes a therapist has a master's or a doctorate, whether they're a licensed counselor, social worker, or a psychologist or psychiatrist. So there's a different emphasis. So therapy is more about treatment, developing a treatment plan, giving a diagnosis, coming up with a plan on how to treat it. What are the outcomes that we're looking for? How to support that individual as they navigate their way through, in the case of using exposure response prevention, helping somebody understand how OCD works. There's the obsession, there's the feelings, and there's the compulsion, and how to kind of be able to manage each piece of that so you can start to feel differently. You don't have to do anything when you have an obsessive thought. So a lot of that is, especially in ERP, it can be fairly directional, right? So a lot of the clients I work with, I use one of the companies I work for, they use a Columbia model. So it's a very structured, laid out treatment plan. There's so many visits. There's so many things that we're looking for as far as, is the treatment working? How do we know? How do we measure it? How do we support the client? And then with peer support, it's a very different thing. So if I'm giving peer support to somebody rather than being a clinician, I'm not the expert, right? I am not the expert in what anybody is feeling or experiencing. What I want to be is to be able to come alongside them and say, I understand some of what you're going through. What else do you want to share? I want to hear what this is like for you. I want to maybe give you ideas of what I did in my own suffering or in my own mental illness that helped me. Or maybe, point out, hey, have you ever thought of it like this? What do you think that would be like? So the point is to be with the person, to show empathy, support, connection. It's not friendship, and that's where you also have to have really good boundaries, because we're not developing friendships here, even though people do get very connected. But it's a way of modeling for people. So like when Christy and I were doing this work in the mental health institutes, we were going in there and telling people who had been in there for sometimes, 10 years, 15 years, like, yes, you can have a mental illness and you can recover and you can go out and get a job and you can have a life and have a relationship. Like mental illness doesn't mean once you're diagnosed, your life sucks from here on out. And for a lot of people, what they heard was, here's your diagnosis. And it's just like, it crushes them. And they've never talked to anybody who was like, oh yeah, I've had a diagnosis. I've been hospitalized. I've, really been through the ringer with it. And guess what? Like, you can manage symptoms. It's possible. Recovery is possible for everybody. In fact, it drives me nuts when people are like, you can't recover from mental illness. I just have to say, bullshit. You can. You can have symptom reduction. You can feel better. You can live a full, meaningful life. You are not your diagnoses. And peer support lends itself to that, to this idea that there is so much more to you than just your mental illness. There's all kinds of opportunities and things to explore. And it's easier to do that with somebody who can say, I've been where you are. This is where I am right now. So maybe your goal is getting out of the hospital, right? How do I help you achieve that goal? If that's something you want to work towards, right? How do I support you in that? I want to hear what you're afraid of. I want to be here for you and also share with you what I had to do and what my experience was like. So it's very different. It is a beautiful adjunct to doing therapy or post-therapy. It can be really, really helpful to have people that you connect with that have your symptoms or diagnoses, especially OCD, because OCD tends to be so isolating. If you have harm OCD, you might not know anybody else in the world that looks like you do. And in group, you might discover like, wow, all kinds of people think that this isn't that weird, right? Everybody else might be telling you, man, you're screwed up. And in group, you're going to hear people go, oh yeah, I deal with that all the time. Right. So it's this normalizing too that it makes it a very powerful experience. It pulls you out of isolation and into connection.
I agree. And I think
valuable.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I think this is a good segue. Well, really quickly, when I did work in the institutions, that like one thing comes to mind for me. I remember thinking, for a long time, I thought I am not qualified to work here. I was like stigmatizing OCD. I was like, I just have OCD. It's not that bad. Even though I almost died from it. But I was sitting there going, I am not qualified. These people, are going to think I'm a joke, and they're going to think you're just like the a la carte OCD, like the secondary diagnosis that goes on with the measure. And there was this one moment, this is one of my favorite stories. I was sitting in with a gentleman and we were having a session, and he was telling me about, he was living with schizoaffective disorder, and he was telling me about some of the stuff he'd been through. And he stopped and he went, you know what, I'm tired of talking about myself. You tell me your story. And I was like, oh no, this is going to be the moment where I'm found out. Like, I'm a fraud. Like, my experience means nothing. And so I was like, okay. So I told him a whole story about having like sexual intrusive thoughts and like all this. And I had a suicide attempt or whatever. And he sat and listened. And afterwards I was like, oh my God, he's going to go and like report me to the charge nurse that I should be. And he was like, oh my God, it must suck to be you. Like, what? And he was like, I'm just going to say it. He was like, that's fucked up. Like, and I was like, okay. But I remember thinking then, like, the value of the two people sharing. It didn't matter what our diagnoses were. It didn't matter what the story was. We were connecting on the fact that we both suffered. At times in our life, we cannot trust our own brains. And that was the mutuality that we found together. And also, which gave me some confidence of like, I'm devaluing my own story, and kind of falling into what a lot of people do and saying, well, this is a major mental illness and this isn't. And I think, to kind of segue, it's, oh, you have a question actually. This is a great question before you bring Neil on, but really quickly, I think I want to emphasize what Melissa says. It is so important with OCD because so many people really have these heavy, scary themes, and we project onto ourselves, we're monsters, we're horrible people. What kind of person has these? So when we get together in a group and there's 5 or 6 people who all have the fear of being a pedophile, they're looking at people's faces and going, wait a minute, these look like normal people. Like, they don't look like monsters. And they see themselves in that other person, and the value of that is magical. So before we bring Neil on, hey Neil, I see you. Before we bring him on, Jennifer, thank you for the question. If there's time, are you able to speak about what it's been like being both a therapist and a peer support specialist? They are so different, and disclosure is not encouraged for therapists. How has it been balancing doing both?
Well, that's an interesting question. So, you know what I say? I am not of the school that says I am the blank space and you come into my therapeutic office and I'm just going to reflect back to you, right? I'm sorry. That's not the kind of therapist I am. I often tell my clients, especially my OCD clients, because I have had major panic disorder. I've been, to the rush to the emergency room numerous times thinking I am dying. So I very often disclose to them, hey, I do know what it's like to feel some of what you're going through. I know what it's like to be paralyzed with anxiety, to feel like I'm going to die. I feel like that actually enhances the relationship. And I'm sensitive to the timing. Some people I know can hear it and relate to it and draw from it. If I feel like the people, if the client isn't ready, I'm not going to share that. I do feel like, as a therapist, I want to help my clients, and sometimes being human with them does that. So I'm not doing actually the role of the peer in that case, but I also don't, I'm not ashamed. I am not ashamed that I had ECT. I am not ashamed that I struggled with major depressive disorder or panic disorder or anything like that. And I do share that with my clients because I do feel like sometimes it's important for them to feel empowered that they are not OCD. They have OCD. That's the problem. They're not the problem. OCD is the problem. Just like for me, the mental health issues I have, that wasn't who I am. I wasn't depressive. I was somebody who had depression, right? And there's a big difference. So I do feel like it can be an adjunct to therapy. Again, you have to be judicious about it. You don't want to give it, I don't want to overshare because it's not about me when I'm doing therapy. It's not even about me when I'm doing peer support. I always want to go at the client's pace. I will use it if they're just telling me like, look, there's no way I can do this. And sometimes they'll say, well, let me tell you something about what I did and how I was able to go through this barrier. And oftentimes it's helpful. So really it's person to person.
Awesome.
That's a good question.
And I would add to that, even though I'm not a therapist, but I would add, just in doing peer support with people with OCD, just the amount of trust someone could have that if that person has experienced not just OCD, but mental illness in general, they're going to feel more comfortable and more likely to be able to share without judgment. And I know that there are ethical barriers to sharing the story, but I think we're on the way out from that.
Yeah, that's really more psychodynamic. Like that's I think older school stuff with behavior therapy, with DBT, CBT. I think the therapists are more human, they're more client-centered, so they're more Rogers informed and more trauma informed, right? So we're much more about the client's experience rather than trying to create this, I'm just the blank page giving you back something. That's much more psychodynamic, really. And I'm not that, I'm a behaviorist.
Let's get on with the recovery era. Forget the medical model.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for the question, Jennifer. Awesome. And we're going to add, hey, whoa, hey. That was really quick.
I wasn't expecting that, actually.
So for the last probably 10 or so minutes, we brought Neil on. We are what?
Yeah, it was just really funny. And honestly, that was an authentic scare. I was like, oh God, now I'm on the internet.
Yeah. I thought it was gonna delay for a moment, and then all of a sudden you're like, boom.
No.
So we want to share some really exciting news. I've been posting about this on my social media, but I'll go ahead and start, and then I'll have the two of you kind of chime in on your feelings and excitement about what we're doing. So for a really long time, I've been wanting to do group support for OCD. I think it's one of the things that I feel like is really missing because people just don't have access unless you're, in a town where a therapist is able to run it, or, really value having someone running a group that's trained and knows what they're doing, which, is what peer supports do, or therapists. But I will be honest with you, I've just been anxious and insecure and feeling like a fraud, and that's why I've never run peer support groups, even though I know how needed they are. And it just in the last few months, I always know when I'm getting signs from the world of you need to do this, and this is what's happening. And a few things happened in a row, and I thought now is the time. And Melissa, my business partner, she started treating OCD few months ago, and I started to see her excitement about the process of people getting better and starting to really understand what OCD is about, because sometimes it's really hard to understand it until you're really saturated in it and seeing the ins and outs of it. And I just thought this is the opportunity. And I will just tell you, my biggest motivator and inspiration to do this is my clients that have POCD, which is pedophilia theme. People they feel like a monster. They feel isolated. They feel scared. They feel like nobody understands, and they feel like horrible, awful people. And I just kept seeing people crying in session going, if only I could meet other people that had this, I would know that I'm not the only one, and I'm not a disgusting human. And I just finally was like, I can't fucking take it anymore. Yeah. We've got to start connecting people so they know that they're not alone, and that these themes do not define them, and so that's when I approached Melissa, and I was like, okay, we got to do this. We know we work well together. We know we're great business partners. She has the knowledge now on the therapeutic level, and I thought, let's do this. So Maggie Perry, I'm just going to give a shout out to Huddle.care. She has been an amazing mentor to us in this journey. We modeled our project after hers, which is she does individual therapy, but she also has group practices. She runs 14 groups a week and 3 community nights. She's superwoman. But I thought I want to do that, so let's bring some more people on. So we're modeling it after that. I think we're hitting a lot of the areas in our community that really, really, really need some attention and some support, and breaking down some barriers. So affordable support. Our groups are $35 small group, $20 community night. That's a big barrier. We're not limited by state. We can get people in from, we had one Q&A where we had 5 countries represented. It was amazing.
Yeah.
And so, we're also giving people, the opportunity to meet other people and know that they're not alone. I'm just going to say it. We haven't done it yet, but I'm going to say it anyway. We're going to start doing nights where people can come in and join us, and we're going to have people that are, you know, really well known in the field, like Phillipson. He doesn't know this yet. I hope he's not listening to this.
I hope he's watching. I really hope he's watching.
You know, we're going to have them come in and do a Q&A or an AMA. Like Allegra Caston, she already knows. You know, we're going to have her come in and do stuff. We're going to do continued education. We're going to do consultation groups for therapists. So this isn't just for people with OCD. We're going to expand this out to try to break down all the barriers in the OCD community. We're solving all the problems, people.
All of them.
So anyway,
Even the world.
we started this week. I thought it was a really successful week.
It
And I'm
was
super excited moving forward. So that's what we're doing. So Melissa and Neil, I would love for y'all to give your thoughts and how you feel about this as well.
Well, I love it. I mean, what can I say? I love it. And I've just been so, I'm so impressed with the honesty and the resiliency and the willingness that people show in the groups that I've been in. And I'm actually running a group tomorrow.
What if I don't have OCD and the thoughts are real? That's the name of the group. Yay!
Yeah.
But it seems like over and over and over, we've heard the same feedback, which is, this is so wonderful to talk to other people that get me. This is so great to have a forum where it's not clinical in nature. It's, you know, not me getting therapy. It's me talking with other people about what it's like to be me. You know, it's just been uplifting, because I think we are providing something that's really needed out there in the community. I don't really know of anybody else that's doing this. It's a desperately needed service. And again, you know, people can come in at any level of recovery or pre-diagnosis, post-diagnosis, in treatment, over, you know, finished. We just, you know, are finding that people want to be in these groups. They have a kind of a need to feel this connection, and it's very exciting. It's very exciting to watch it grow.
Yeah.
Yay. What about you, Neil?
Yeah, I feel amazing. I don't know. I feel really good about this. No, I guess I'll say this. Yeah, I think it's an honor to have this opportunity for not only myself, but for others to get into a place where there's a shared, not only lineage, I guess you could say, but the struggling and the suffering when you first get into treatment versus when you exit treatment or when you've been in remission for years and years and years is astounding. So to be able to have the opportunity to give people hope that there is another side, right? I mean, it's like telling someone in hell that that there's a way back to heaven. You know, like, it's crazy to see the joy on people's faces when, you know, it's someone like me who I've been in remission for like 2 months now. I guess that's not that long of a time. It feels like an eternity. But yeah, I mean, to see the joy in people's faces, like, oh my gosh, like I can like have a normal, semi-normal life again, like whatever normal is. Yep, you can do that. You can have friendships again and relationships, and you can eat whatever food you want. Like, I know, and for them, that's mind blowing. And for me, back when I had contamination OCD, that would have been mind blowing too. So no, it's a really special opportunity for all of us to get together and just walk alongside of each other in this journey. Yeah.
And so some of the things that we are really wanting to, you know, just so y'all know, this is like week number 1. And so we're going to take the next few weeks to kind of work out the kinks. So obviously we're asking people to be patient, but one of the things we're going to do is continue to listen to the community. What do you need? What do you want? What are the topics you want to hear? And we already know some of the hot topics that people really need the support on, but we also know different support for when you haven't started therapy versus after therapy. Support is needed when you relapse. So if you're, you know, a year into recovery and boom, I'm all of a sudden like spiraling back down, come over to OCDPeers.com and we're running 2 relapse groups a week. Not right this second, but we will be. You know, and so that way you can jump in with other people who are scared, and then you remember, okay, I've got the tools here. That's right. And so our goal, I guess, kind of our grandiose goal, other than saving the world, is that we are going to expand, bring people on that are trained, that understand peer support versus therapy. So this is always going to be straight up support, non-reassurance, understanding OCD, but our goal is to run groups all day, every day, and then eventually expand to different languages and be able to have other countries represented so we can get support everywhere. Now, I know that's a grandiose goal, but you know what? Like 5 years ago, if someone had told me I'd be running my own peer support practice, I would have been like, what? So I feel like we have a solid team right now, and and there's just no limit to what we can do to find people in our community and give them hope and let them know that they're not alone. So so excited to share this opportunity with both Melissa and Neil. I trust them with my life and love them both. And I just think this is, this is a really special endeavor. So please reach out to any of us if you have questions. You can find us at OCD Peer. Oh, let me write that on the banner. OCD.
You just like using the banner, don't you?
I do. Well, I mean, when I first figured out how to do it, look at watch here. Hey, OCDPeers.com. Shout out to Sean David who built our site. It's amazing. Sean David Designs if you need WordPress site. Any final thoughts, like hopes, dreams, goals, Melissa and Neil?
Well, yeah, I want to just touch really briefly when we talked about this, about creating this company, when you were telling me about your vision and idea around it. Chrissy's always like the visionary, and I like do the grunt work in the back, right? She's kind of like the front.
Melissa, I wouldn't have nothing would happen.
But one of the things also that we hope to create out of this is jobs for people with OCD. Our goal would be that people come to the groups, they get the support they need, they start into their recovery process or expand it or accelerate it, and eventually, we want people to be able to run the groups as well. Right. So, I feel like we have a couple of things that are really important about OCD Peers. One is it's to outreach people who need the support, who need community. And then the second one is to create an opportunity to be a peer, to work in the field, to help other people, right? It's kind of like a pay it forward type of thing. And I think that's such an important thing to understand. Like the vision isn't just like, let's get some people together. It's also about how do we contribute to the greater good of the world, of the community, the OCD community, and, provide an opportunity for people to expand on what they can do in their own recovery. So,
yeah.
What about you, Neil? Final thoughts?
I love running groups. I don't know. I think that's about it. I love working with people with OCD. I have OCD. Yeah, I'm very excited for the future. And that's it.
So stay tuned. We will continue to update as everything expands. Right now, we're probably just going to be running groups for lived experience. Our goal is to start a track for family members and definitely for therapists to run consultation groups, continued education, and who knows what the future holds. I think it's pretty magical when you have a few people together that have a dream and have the ambition and drive, and are just like, let's take the risk and live with the uncertainty. Yeah. So thank you so much, Melissa and Neil, for coming on today.
Pleasure.
Of course, yeah.
And thank you all for joining on this Fireside Friday. I love these chats. They've been so much fun. I appreciate your feedback. And if you have anything for me, you can reach out at ocd.chrissy@gmail.com, and you can visit our page at OCD Gamechangers. You can peruse what we're doing. We've got lots of cool stuff coming up that's not on the website yet, but will be soon. And you can make a donation at OCDGamechangers.com. And we look forward to seeing you Monday with Miss Allegra Castins for Maverick Mondays. Wait, Monday Mavericks. It's interchangeable.
Interchangeable, either one.
So we'll see you Monday afternoon to talk about Allegra, what she's up to, and how she is the biggest kick-ass advocate ever. So thank you all for being here, and we will have a wonderful weekend.
Yes, thank you. Bye.